For the month of January, we have Mark Meadows, Travis Gorton, and Louise Grieve, who were sentenced on the 6th of January. In February 2022, Keith Green, a 52-year-old man from Banbury, was tragically murdered in his own garden. The crime was orchestrated by Meadows, who was 25, and who was in a tumultuous relationship with Keith's partner, Louise Grieve, who was 38. Meadows, driven by jealousy and resentment towards Keith, conspired with his half-brother Gorton, who was 20 at the time, to eliminate him. On the night of the 13th of February 2022, Meadows and Gorton ambushed Keith in his garden, stabbing him multiple times with a zombie knife that Meadows had purchased for Grieve. The attack was premeditated, with Meadows and Gorton having planned the murder over several months. Evidence presented during the trial revealed that Meadows had expressed his desire to remove Keith from Grieve's life, and Gorton agreed to assist him. Following the murder, Meadows and Gorton were arrested shortly after the incident, and investigations uncovered extensive communications between the conspirators, including text messages and phone records, which detailed their plans and the roles each played in the crime. Additionally, forensic evidence such as DNA traces linked both men to the murder scene. Grieve, who had been in a relationship with Keith, was arrested later in the investigation. She was found to have been complicit in the planning and execution of the murder, having facilitated the attack by allowing Meadows and Gorton access to her home. Her involvement was substantiated through evidence of her communication with both men, indicating her active participation in the conspiracy. In December 2022, Meadows and Gorton were convicted of murder and of possession of a bladed article, and on the 6th of January 2023, Meadows was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 23 years, while Gorton received a life sentence with a minimum term of 17 years. Grieve was convicted of manslaughter rather than murder and was sentenced to 8 years in prison. A 15-year-old youth, whose identity is still protected due to legal reasons, was also convicted of manslaughter and received a 2-year youth rehabilitation order. For February, we have Simon Gould, who was sentenced on the 22nd of February. In August 2022, 26-year-old Elizabeth McCann was murdered in Ashton-under-Lyme in Greater Manchester. She was attacked by 51-year-old Gould, whom she had met at the Health and Wellbeing College in November 2019. On the 24th of August 2022, Gould invited Elizabeth to the Star Inn pub, where he plied her with alcohol, leading to her becoming heavily intoxicated. After being escorted out of the pub, Gould took her to his flat, where he raped her and sexually assaulted her before strangling her to death. Following the murder, Gould reported the crime to the police, claiming it was an accident during consensual intercourse. However, evidence including explicit photos and videos found on his phone contradicted his account, revealing the premeditated nature of the attack. In February 2023, Gould pleaded guilty to murder, rape, sexual assault, and assault by penetration, and he was sentenced on the 22nd of February 2023 to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 35 years. For the month of March, we have Michael Goodwin, Connor Goodwin, Keenan Anderson, and Leon Riley, who were sentenced on the 24th of March. On the 25th of August 2018, Anthony Sargent, a 33-year-old father of 8, was fatally shot in a drive-by shooting outside of his mother's home on Rickman Drive in Lee Bank in Birmingham. Anthony was socialising with friends when he was struck in the back by at least 2 shots fired from a passing vehicle. Despite receiving immediate medical attention and being transported to hospital, he succumbed to his injuries 6 days later. The investigation led to the arrest of 4 men, brothers Michael and Connor Goodwin, Keenan Anderson, and Leon Riley. All 4 were charged with Anthony's murder. During the trial at Birmingham Crown Court, the defendants denied involvement in the crime. However, evidence was presented by the prosecution that demonstrated that the men had planned and executed the attack together. A significant breakthrough in the case occurred when the firearm used in the shooting was recovered during a police raid in Derbyshire in November 2019. Experts from the National Ballistics Intelligence Service confirmed that unique markings on the weapon matched those from the bullets used to kill Anthony. This forensic evidence was pivotal in linking the defendants to the crime. Further incriminating evidence included photographs of the defendants celebrating Connor Goodwin's birthday at a pub less than 24 hours after the shooting, while Anthony was still hospitalised. Following their trial in July of 2020, all 4 men were found guilty of murder, and on the 24th of March they were sentenced to life imprisonment. Connor Goodwin and Keenan Allen were each ordered to serve a minimum of 32 years, while Michael Goodwin and Leon Riley each received minimum terms of 28 years. For the month of April, we have Thomas Cashman, who was sentenced on the 3rd of April. Cashman, a 34-year-old drug dealer from Liverpool, was convicted of the murder of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Korbel, which occurred on the 22nd of August 2022. On that evening, Cashman was pursuing another drug dealer, Joseph Nee, through the streets of Dovecote. In an attempt to escape, Nee forced his way into the home of Olivia's family. As Cashman fired shots at Nee, one bullet passed through the front door, injuring Olivia's mother, Cheryl Korbel, and fatally striking Olivia. The subsequent investigation led to Cashman's arrest on the 29th of September 2022. A key witness, who was a former partner of Cashman, testified that he had come home in a distressed state after the shooting and was seeking assistance. Her testimony, along with CCTV footage and forensic evidence, played a crucial role in linking Cashman to the crime. The trial of Thomas Cashman commenced at Manchester Crown Court on the 7th of March 2023. Cashman faced multiple charges, including the murder of Olivia and the attempted murder of Joseph Nee, as well as the wounding of Olivia's mother, Cheryl. On the 30th of March 2023, the jury found Cashman guilty on all of the charges. On the 3rd of April 2023, Cashman was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 42 years. The sentencing judge remarked on the severity of his actions and the profound impact on Olivia's family. It's notable in this case that Cashman refused to attend the sentencing hearing, a decision that was met with widespread criticism. In the aftermath, Paul Russell, who had assisted Cashman by driving him away from the scene and disposing of evidence, was sentenced to 22 months in prison for the offence of assisting an offender. And despite Cashman's subsequent attempts to appeal his convictions, his efforts have been unsuccessful and his sentence remains in effect. For the month of May, we have David Smith, who was sentenced on the 26th of May. In August of 1991, Sarah Crump, a 33-year-old medical secretary, was brutally murdered in her Southall, West London flat. She had been supplementing her income by working part-time for an escort agency. On the evening of the 28th of August 1991, she arranged to meet a client who had booked her services under a false name. This client was later identified to be David Smith. Smith, who was then 34, arrived at Sarah's residence that evening. He briefly left to withdraw cash before returning and staying until the early hours of the 29th of August. Tragically, Sarah's body was discovered by the police on the 1st of September. She had suffered extensive injuries, indicating a violent and gruesome attack. Following the discovery, Smith was arrested on the 5th of September 1991 and charged with Sarah's murder. However, during his 1993 trial, he was acquitted of the charges before boasting that he had got away with it. Despite the acquittal, Smith's criminal activities did not cease. In 1999, he was convicted of the murder of Amanda Walker, a crime he committed after his release. While on remand for this offence, Smith confided in a fellow inmate about his involvement in Sarah Crump's murder. Years later, a cold case review by the Metropolitan Police Service, in collaboration with the Crown Prosecution Service Appeals and Review Unit, unearthed new and compelling evidence. This development led to the case being referred back to the Court of Appeal, resulting in the quashing of Smith's previous acquittal. In May 2023, Smith, who was then 67, was retried and found guilty of Sarah Crump's murder, and on the 26th of May 2023, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 27 years. For the month of June, we have Paris Mayo, who was sentenced on the 23rd of June. In March 2019, Paris Mayo, who was then 15 years old, concealed her pregnancy and gave birth alone in the living room of the family home in Ross-on-Wye in Hertfordshire. Unbeknownst to her family, who were present in the house at the time, Mayo delivered a baby boy that she named Stanley. The birth occurred without any medical assistance or support. Shortly after the birth, Mayo inflicted fatal injuries on her newborn son. The following day, on the 24th of March 2019, emergency services were called to her home, where they discovered that Stanley had died. An investigation was launched, leading to Mayo's arrest. During the trial at Worcester Crown Court, which concluded on the 23rd of June 2023, the prosecution presented evidence of Mayo's deliberate actions to conceal her pregnancy and the subsequent infliction of injuries on Stanley. The defence highlighted her young age, lack of support, and the traumatic circumstances surrounding the event. Notwithstanding this, the jury found Mayo guilty of murder, and on the 26th of June she was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 12 years. The judge during the sentencing acknowledged the challenging circumstances that Mayo faced, but emphasised the severity of her actions. And this case has sparked significant public debate, with legal experts and women's rights advocates criticising the decision to try and sentence Mayo as an adult for an offence committed at the age of 15. And in response to the conviction, Mayo's legal team has initiated an appeal, arguing that the original trial did not fully account for her age, mental state, and lack of support during the incident. The appeal in this case is due to be heard over the next few months. For July, we have Connor Chapman, who was sentenced on the 7th of July. On the 24th of December 2022, 26-year-old beautician Elle Edwards was fatally shot outside the Lighthouse pub in Worsley Village in Merseyside. The assailant was 23-year-old Chapman, who discharged 12 rounds from a Scorpion submachine gun intending to target rival gang members. Tragically, Elle, an innocent bystander, was struck twice in the back of the head, leading to her death. The incident occurred shortly before midnight as Elle stepped outside of the pub for a cigarette. Chapman, who was aiming at two men believed to be his rivals, instead hit her and injured 5 others. The attack was part of an ongoing feud between local gangs from neighbouring estates. Following the shooting, Chapman fled the scene in a stolen Mercedes. He sought refuge at the residence of one of his friends, Thomas Waring, in Barnston. CCTV footage later revealed Chapman arriving at Waring's home, inadvertently dropping the firearm before picking it up again. The subsequent investigation led to Chapman's arrest on the 11th of January 2023 in mid-Wales. He faced multiple charges, including the murder of Elle, 2 counts of attempted murder, and possession of a firearm with intent to endanger life. Waring was also apprehended and charged with possession of a prohibited weapon and assisting an offender. During the trial, which commenced on the 13th of June 2023 at Liverpool Crown Court, the prosecution presented compelling evidence, including DNA linking Chapman to bullet casings found at the crime scene. Despite his plea of not guilty, the jury found him guilty after deliberating for just under 4 hours. On the 7th of July 2023, Chapman received a life sentence with a minimum term of 48 years. For his part in the crime, Waring was sentenced to 9 years in prison. For August, we have Stephen Ansbro, who was sentenced on the 7th of August. In March 2023, 59-year-old Jane Karlson was murdered at her sheltered accommodation facility in Barnard Castle in County Durham. The perpetrator, 60-year-old Ansbro, a fellow resident, stabbed and slashed her 60 times with a bread knife. Prior to the attack, Ansbro had expressed his frustration with Jane, stating that he would do time for her because she was getting on his nerves. Ansbro attempted to stage the scene to resemble a suicide by bolting Jane's door from the outside and inflicting a superficial wound to his own neck. However, his actions were inconsistent with a suicide, leading investigators to suspect foul play. In May 2023, Ansbro pleaded guilty to the offence of murder, and at his sentencing in August 2023, Newcastle Crown Court heard that he had a history of violent behaviour, including previous convictions for robbery. The court also heard that he'd been under investigation for historical sex offences against a teenager in the 1990s and a child cruelty offence at the time of the murder. He was sentenced on the 7th of August 2023 to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 18 years. For September, we have Brian Jewell, who was sentenced on the 25th of September. In January 2023, a fatal altercation occurred between Brian Jewell and Stephen Cook, both members of Exeter's homeless community. The incident took place on Sidwell Street, a central area in Exeter, following a heated argument between the two men. Witnesses reported that during the confrontation, Cook threatened Jewell with a broken bottle, leading to a physical struggle. In the course of this fight, Jewell inflicted a single stab wound to Cook's chest, using a knife he had acquired the previous day. Cook managed to enter a nearby betting shop covered in blood, and emergency services were called. Despite medical intervention, Cook was pronounced dead approximately an hour later at Royal Devon and Exeter Hospital. Jewell was arrested later that evening. During the investigation, a witness directed police to the location near St Sidwell's Church, where Jewell had concealed the knife used in the stabbing. The court heard that Jewell, who was 19 at the time, had purchased the knife for self-defence, citing safety concerns due to his homelessness. Both Jewell and Cook were known locally within the community, and their confrontation was described as a drunken argument that escalated tragically. In August 2023, after a 2-week trial at Exeter Crown Court, Jewell was found guilty of murder. He had denied the charge, claiming that he had acted in self-defence after Cook attacked him with a broken bottle, causing a facial injury. However, the jury rejected this defence, concluding that Jewell's actions were deliberate and not justified by the circumstances. On the 25th of September 2023, Jewell was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 20 years. In October 2024, Jewell appealed his sentence, arguing that the minimum term was manifestly excessive. Whilst the Court of Appeal reviewed the case, they ultimately dismissed the appeal. For October, we have Thomas Grant, who was sentenced on the 30th of October. On the 25th of December 2021, 28-year-old Thomas Grant committed the murder of 39-year-old widow Lucy Clues in her home in West Chadsmore in Staffordshire. The two had met on Christmas Eve at a location in Hensford, where Lucy was recently bereaved and vulnerable, and offered Grant shelter over the festive period as he had nowhere else to go. Grant, who was a known drug addict, utilised Lucy's residence as a base to support his habit. He stole and sold her personal belongings, including her wedding ring and a necklace belonging to her late husband, to fund his drug use. Additionally, he also sold Lucy's mobile phone. The prosecution at trial argued that Grant's actions were driven by his need to finance his drug addiction. He was observed on CCTV leaving the scene of the murder on Christmas Day. When arrested on the 30th of December 2021, Grant provided a false name to officers and denied having any tattoos, an assertion disproven when officers requested him to roll up his sleeves. A knife containing both Lucy and Grant's DNA were discovered at the crime scene. A post-mortem examination revealed that Lucy had suffered multiple severe stab wounds and had been strangled prior to her death. During his time in custody awaiting trial, Grant made admissions to officers regarding the murder, but later retracted these statements, accusing the officers of lying about his confessions. Throughout the legal proceedings, he denied responsibility, claiming that someone else was responsible for the murder, but refused to identify the individual. Following a 5-week trial at Stafford Crown Court, Grant was found guilty of murder by a jury on the 8th of August. He was then sentenced to life imprisonment on the 30th of October 2023, with a minimum term of 25 years. For November, we have James Witham, Joseph Pearce, Niall Barry and Sean Zeisz, who were sentenced on the 22nd of November. In August 2022, 28-year-old Ashley Dale was shot and killed at her home on Leinster Road in Old Swan in Liverpool. The assailant, James Witham, who was 41, was armed with a Scorpion submachine gun, the same type of weapon used in the murder of Elle Edwards, forcing his way into Ashley's residence. Despite her attempts to flee, he pursued her through the house, firing 10 bullets, one which fatally struck and killed her. The attack was part of a targeted plot against Ashley's boyfriend, Lee Harrison, who was not present at the time. The assailants, including Witham, had intended to kill Harrison due to his involvement in a dispute with a rival gang. Ashley, an innocent bystander, became the unintended victim of this violent act. Following a 7-week trial at Liverpool Crown Court, Witham, along with Zeisz, Barry and Pearce, were found guilty of Ashley's murder. They were also convicted of conspiracy to murder Lee Harrison and conspiracy to possess a prohibited weapon, specifically the Scorpion submachine gun, with intent to endanger life. On the 22nd of November 2023, the court sentenced the 4 men to life imprisonment, with Witham receiving a minimum term of 43 years, Niall Barry receiving 47 years, Zeisz receiving 42 years, and Pearce receiving 41 years. For the month of December, we have Karl, Belinga, Karlson, Ogie, and Paul Mbwasse, who were sentenced on the 18th of December. On the 19th of March 2023, 17-year-old Truss Gangata was murdered at a house party in Armley in Leeds. The attack was a case of mistaken identity, as the perpetrators sought revenge for an early assault on one of their friends, believing that Truss was involved. The assailants, Belinga, who was 20, Ogie, who was 19, and Mbwasse, who was 19, fatally stabbed Truss 14 times. The incident unfolded when Belinga, having been assaulted earlier, enlisted the help of Ogie and Mbwasse to retaliate. They armed themselves with large kitchen knives and, along with another individual, attended the party. Mistaking Truss for the individual who had earlier attacked Belinga, they entered the home and launched a brutal assault. Despite immediate medical attention, Truss succumbed to his injuries and was pronounced dead at Leeds General Infirmary. The pathologist's report indicated that the fatal wounds were inflicted to his chest, critically injuring his lungs and aorta. Following the attack, the defendants provided varying accounts to the police, each attempting to deflect blame onto the others. Belinga, Ogie, and Mbwasse were arrested and charged with murder. The other individual was charged with manslaughter. At trial, the prosecution presented evidence, including communication data, GPS, and CCTV footage, to reconstruct the events leading to Truss's death. In November 2023, after a 10-week trial at Leeds Crown Court, a jury unanimously convicted Belinga, Ogie, and Mbwasse of murder, and the 4th individual was found guilty of manslaughter. During the sentencing on the 18th of December 2023, the judge stated the senselessness of the attack and the devastating effect on Truss's family. All 3 were each given a life sentence with a minimum term of 23 years, and the 4th individual convicted of manslaughter was given a 16-year sentence, which he will initially serve at a Young Offenders Institute.